We have a ninja on legally prescribed drugs on a podcast.
Yeah.
And you can't get any better than that. So there's just absolutely zero filter. He's got drugs. He's got coffee. It's just a roller coaster on these podcasts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of these podcasts. I can't believe we're still doing them and that we haven't been taken off of air yet. I'm Paul Meenan, and I am joined on this podcast by...
Hey, it's David Watts here, aka Sparky Ninja.
Now, Dave, we have a new co-host today, and that new co-host, and I am absolutely privileged to say, is a trusted electrician.
Luke Wichard from My Trusted Electrician, although I say I'm a trusted electrician, I hope I am.
So, Luke, I was going to say my first question on this probing, why should I trust you?
Because this top was really expensive to buy and I don't want to change the branding just yet.
Just for those listening, by the way, I've met him and he is actually a lovely, lovely chap, and I do actually trust him because he's got a lot of integrity, and you can check him out on his YouTube channel and see his very honest and transparent thought processes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, but am I right in thinking that you call yourself my trusted electrician, but the whole objective of you putting yourself on social media was for your local community to be able to see your work and for you to be transparent and open to them, and hence the trusted aspect where you can basically open up and expose your workmanship for them to yeah, that's what I thought. Cool.
Yeah, it is. I have to say that is wicked. To be honest with you, Luke, that is. It's a quirky. It's not. When you first hear of it, you think, oh, quirky. But then actually, when you look at your content, one of the things I love about your content on YouTube is all of your content is the one-man thought piece. It's you're making your engineering decisions, you're making your rationale, you're explaining yourself as to what you do and why you do it. The only other guys I see really doing that, well, when I say the other guys, there's quite a lot of YouTubers now doing that, but you were one of the first guys that I saw, and the only other ones that stand out for me are like the PB plumbers of this world, who really go out of their way to show and inform people of their decision making, which is really cool. So, plus it's a really cool brand as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, originally you are right, David. It was I had a lot of stuff stolen. I did a lot of pictures. I tried to think of everything I could possibly do to try and win work. It would be like reviews and pictures. And then I found that all the hard work I'd done, other people could just nick, not do any of the effort, put it on their websites. I actually had one person contact me, I think it was through Facebook, and they asked me for some advice, and I thought I'd just do a little bit of friendly Facebook stalkering. Looked on their site, I had all my pictures,
or your pictures, or your workmanship on there, on there. Yeah,
Luke, I can promise you this: over the last few years that we've known Dave and known each other, the amount of stuff that has been pinched and borrowed and stolen, and I know you're supposed to take it as a homage from us, is mine. But I think, remember once, Dave, I rang you up and said there's some bloke who's virtually copied your logo for his company, and it was like a variation on a theme of your lightning bolts in a ninja star type style. And bless Dave, yeah. It takes a lot to rile Dave up.
But it does, but watch me go when I do.
Yes.
Different colour though, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was a different colour. But honestly, we could do a podcast about intellectual property theft alone, but that would have to be ultra censored for at least those of the age of 30 and above. And it would be every other word would be F and C words. So I don't think we'll ever get around to doing that unless we're again in Coventry in the pub around a table where we really put the world to rights. But I don't know if we'd want to record it either. But anyway, Luke, tell us a little bit about your background, because you've had a fascinating time in the electrical industry. Tell everybody about your experience.
It's fascinating. I'll be honest. I think I'm just like the margarine. I think there's a lot of other people like me out there. It's just I'm the only one that picks up a camera. I left school. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. I enjoyed art. Went off to did art for about 3 days. Realised it wasn't going to be making me any money. My dad was in the building trade, and the only thing that I considered that I would actually like doing would be electrics. I managed to find a course. It was late into the year. I was quite fortunate to still be able to get on. I think a few people dropped out. Back in the day, it was still really hard. Some people would drop out straight away because they obviously just didn't get on with it. It wasn't what they expected. I got on the course, managed to fly through it. Actually got a handshake from the mayor of Wandsworth, so I managed to fly past the rest of the class. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll be honest with you, it's not until sort of recently I realised I was probably always going to be an electrician, because even when I was a lad, I was a bit of a geek. I just had drawers full of wires and bits out of calculators, the old photo cells. I had batteries, speakers, all sorts. I used to love putting things together and making. So I had Meccano, motors, like a lot. But yeah, no, I'm really fortunate to have fallen into this. Got myself an apprenticeship, had a really tough one. I won't go through all the stuff that we had to go through, but it was a very grinding apprenticeship. 4 years later, I left that job, got another job elsewhere, purely because, to be honest, it wasn't a very nice job. So I got another job elsewhere, worked for another company for 4 years. And at the end of that, I kind of reached like a crossroads. I just recently had a kid. 2010 was sort of like the recession. The company I was on was running out of work. And I started doing private work on the side. It started paying off quite well. And I just continued off in that direction, made loads of mistakes being self-employed. 8 years later, I went to become my trusted electrician, and I just basically started afresh. I just thought, you know what, I'm self-employed, I'm walking down the road, I know all the mistakes I've made, I know what I need to do to make it right. Let's start again and use all my knowledge to try and do this properly.
So, but you have, one of the things you have had, Luke, if you don't mind me saying this, is you've had a unique privilege in respects of you've got the domestic. Obviously, a lot of the work you do is domestic, but you've had an industrial and commercial applied background as well, which, let's be honest about it, not a lot of sparks have. I for one was lucky. I had a balance, predominantly industrial, but having done both, there is a awful lot to be said for people who have done both sides of the coin. You know, they've gone into the domestic, the industrial, because you always cross-pollinate with your knowledge. You know, you can go to a house and see an industrial spark when they're putting, you know, black or galv conduit round and really taking those industrial type measures. So you're very privileged that you've had that. What would you say of the three areas, the domestic, commercial, industrial, that you've enjoyed the most, or what have you taken from them? What's your favourite?
I get bored easily, and it'd be hard to pick a favourite because I don't like doing anything too much for too long. I love to do something for a little while, then put it down and start something new. I'm very fortunate. I'm also very lucky because I think to have done the variety of things that I've done, I think a lot of people, sometimes it's best to just focus on something in front of you and become very good at that particular task. If you give somebody too many things to do, you'll just become mediocre at many different tasks. And I wouldn't say I don't want to say I'm good at things, but I think I've managed to take on board a lot of different things. We've done basically every different type of cable you can do. I mean, you've got your MICCs. I even did it old school. My boss showed me how to peel it off with an old screwdriver. We've done SWAs. We've literally done every type of cable and containment you can possibly think of. We've worked in schools. We've worked industrial. We've done like storage units. We've worked in warehouses. We've worked in blocks of flats, upgrading all the submains. We have actually had a really wide variety of things that we've done. If I did have to pick a favourite, I couldn't pick a favourite. No, to be honest, I like them all in moderation.
Do you know what? I actually preferred, of all the stuff I've ever done, domestic, and it was because of the people. When I was doing central heating wiring and stuff, going into people's houses, you met characters, you met different stories. And you're right, I'm the same. I would get bored. I used to be scared of something, so I'd go and do it, and I'd repeat until it became second nature. Then I got bored, so then I looked around me, and it was like the people I was around, the influences on me, the stories that the customers had to tell. But I mean, I remember walking into houses and I was like, oh, bored, I've got to do an S-plan today, this is going to be really boring, and put in a few spur. But I'd go into the intake position under the stairs, and there'd be an old coffin fuse arrangement where it was an old big porcelain fused line conductor and a fused neutral conductor, and you go, oh, not seen this before, I now need to know everything about that. And so you'd ring up the D&O and just soak the knowledge while you're wiring up your Y&S plan and all your valves. and I found that was what got me through the day. That
Right.
sponge type approach to understanding. And I'm the same with social media. I think Dave's the same as well, aren't you, Dave? It's anything new or different. Ooh,
It does. I mean,
as well.
My old time on the tools, I did quite a bit of industrial, but when I started dipping into light commercial and domestic, I found that was I could apply the bigger, diverse set of skills, and every day was a new learning opportunity. I ended up a lot in the domestic and light commercial, working with local authorities in their buildings, libraries and schools and things like that. And there is such a diverse amount of workload there that you can easily use a lot of those skills that you get. Heavy industry was there was a lot of repetition. I got bored pretty quick with that. But even when I got into training after that, I bump into trainers who just do one subject. There's a guy who just delivers PAT testing training full time, and I was like, I mean, God forbid how you could do that. I'd much rather have, I don't know, 60 to 80% proficiency in all subjects I teach, so I can then just top that up, ready for every session, than just delve into one subject and never have my brain working again. So the more your brain works, and again, it's like Paul just said with social media, just finding different avenues to share and seek further knowledge. It's again back to like you said, why you knew you were going to be a spark when you were younger, because you were just into thinking, you were into playing with those toys, whatever, that would just allow you to carry on thinking instead of just following the rules and following the instructions. You'd actually be able to expand and think further. Any opportunities like that is always stuff that I get involved with.
Yeah, I totally agree. When there's something new, it just attracts me. It's fantastic. I love to be able to ask questions, and it just makes the day run a lot quicker as well. As soon as you stop asking questions because you know as much as you can know, it's when things get a little bit tedious.
I always take that as a positive, though. I mean, I've always got, when I left college, when I'd done my 3 years, the one unit I never passed was central heating wiring, because I was scared of it. I couldn't understand the whole follow the lives and the switches and all the bits and bobs. And then eventually I got an opportunity to throw myself into my fears, and I found I've never stopped. But you're right. I mean, you learn to a certain extent, and then you move on. And I find the biggest challenge, is sure does Dave as well, it's dusting off that rust. It's like I've always said to people, if you asked me to do like conduit bending, there'd be an elephant's graveyard somewhere until I got the knack of it. Do you know what I mean? I'd find the back of the bend and I'd be back on it. It would take me a good bloody while to rekindle some of the skills. Same with central heating wiring. You have to, your brain allocates so much space for knowledge, and if you don't use it, it becomes forgotten. But one of the things I find fascinating about the modern industry is, especially with social media, there's some fascinating people online now. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's one lady, her Twitter handle is Down to Earth Spark. Katie Sparks, and she's a domestic, commercial and marine electrician, and she puts her stuff on social media, and she does like boats, and I find that fascinating. Electrical installations on boats, something I've not done. There's a wealth of knowledge and quirks and rules and things that none of us have ever done before, which would be really good to share with the industry, because I just find I find it fascinating. I mean, you're on water, you're doing earth loop impedance and sockets on water, your earth referencing and different earthing conditions, because effectively you are a floating earth. So I just find all of that fascinating. And I think there's lots and lots of really good people on social media who have lots of good experience. And I think it'd be really good for them to, at some point, share their knowledge and their experiences, and also encourage other people. Because there's quite a lot of ladies in our industry at the moment, really, Karen Boom, doing loads of good work to promote ladies sharing their knowledge and experience, which is I think it's a cracking thing.
What was their Twitter handle?
Oh, it's down to, as in the number 2, right. Earth Spark.
Yeah, I'll be looking at later as well.
Yeah, she's really good.
That's fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate things like that, because once you sort of come out of your apprenticeship, you kind of hit a wall. And I mean, fantastic YouTube's come around now, but until then, you just knew what you knew. There wasn't really many places you could go to learn more. I mean, the 7671 does cover things like marinas and that, but I'll be honest, I'd never touch it. I don't feel there's enough in the 7671, and it's vague. I would rather have a hands-on experience with someone sort of holding my hand and walking me through it and sort of telling me the do's and don'ts and the little tips and tricks. And by the way, a lot of people make this mistake, don't do that. And this is going to make the boat sink, don't drill a hole there.
There is, I'm pretty sure there is a, Dave, if I remember right, and I can't remember the number because I'm rusty, but there is a British standard for electrical installations on boats or ships. I just can't remember the number because there's electrical installation for construction site standard. There's 7909. There's one for boats. Then obviously the one that we know. Yeah, there's lots of quirky things out there, but I find people like that fascinating.
Yeah,
because they have a different experience. I mean, Dave will tell you, I'm a bit of a Mr. Watt stalker because of his 7909 knowledge. Because until I met Dave, I didn't know about 7909's existence. And now I do. I've been to a CPD seminar that Napit did on 7909, and I found it fascinating.
I think the biggest thing about 7909 though is how simple it is. It's a very simple, tiny standard. It's no further complicated than BS 5266 or anything like that. It's just there's just so much connivance in the industry because the industry is so quick with the build up, the breakdown, and the time management that it's just not implemented enough. It's starting to gain traction and awareness though.
Well, trust me, I've had jobs where they have fallen within 7909, and I've been the only person within a 50-mile radius who even knew the standard existed.
Yeah.
And I've literally said to an electrical contractor, this is a BS 7909 electrical installation. They've gone, pardon? Do you remember that advert years ago where they're waving the dime bar in front of the bloke, Harry Enfield? Do you remember your first dime? Hey, what? Honestly, that is what 7909 is at the moment to a lot of this industry.
Temporary installations.
It is, yes.
Yeah, it's for the event industry.
Yeah.
You say 5266, that's fire alarm, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, 5266 emergency lighting. 583.
Yeah, sorry, emergency lighting. Yeah, emergency lighting.
5266 is my favourite standard. Sad.
Yeah, no. So I mean, 7909. It's mainly obviously built towards festivals and theatres and production sets, but the scope of it is if you're going to erect a temporary electrical installation, it's split into two systems. There's small systems and large systems. A small system could be something as simple as putting in a 4-gang extension lead outside of a window for a marquee for a company to run a weekend fete. If you're going to create a temporary electrical installation, then allow the area to be occupied by the public, then there's that extra level of due diligence and reporting and certification to do.
Yeah.
And that's what it tries to cover.
So, Luke, just to give you an example of one. So I've got a railway station, Fenchurch Street. It's in the centre of London, East London. And outside there's a farmer's market. So you have about 8 stands there, and they have cooking plates, extension leads, all sorts. That in itself is a 7909 because it's not there every day. But 3 or 4 days of the week it is. They make a lot of money, but the electrical installations, the distribution should be inspected, tested, checked to make sure it's safe. And that's just an example. So if you're ever asked to go and do some sort of temporary event, even if it's temporary electrics for a fairground that may be in for a weekend, that sort of stuff would be 7909 as well.
Yeah, I assumed a fairground would be. When you said the farmer's market, as it's sort of obviously going to be there every week, I would have probably kind of turned a blind eye to that one.
No. So the one that we have at Fenchurch is they basically not when I say a farmer's market, it's probably I think they call it that, but it's basically temporary lunch stands. Where you can go get like Caribbean food, Chinese food, and all the different pop-up stands that you get, basically. But they use a hell of a lot of power. You go along and go, oh, there's a 16 amp extension lead. What are they pulling? Oh, that cable's warm. Yeah, okay. Maybe nobody's considered this. Maybe we need to do something about this.
On it to warm it up, don't they?
Yeah, well, this is it. Especially in the winter, it melts the snow. But yeah, so that's the sort of things really. Ever since I read 7999 and did that, I have looked at electrical installations outside, especially in a completely different light.
But again, I mean, remember this time last year, I was being a bit of a pain in the ass to a couple of retailers because of their temporary installations for Christmas.
Oh yeah, they were awful.
Because again, it's still a temporary electrical installation that you're putting in an occupied space that the public are going to be walking through inside your building, and a lot of these are installed by Tim Nice but Dim or whoever the member of staff is. It's just extension leads.
I know a florist, a very large florist, and that was their job. Because I mean, a lot of people ask who are these companies that install Christmas lights, because obviously they only have one job a year. But it was a florist. It was a very large company. Their job was to decorate the communal areas of like big hotels and that, and they took it upon themselves to do the Christmas lights each year as well. And like you said, I think it was. I did some pat testing from the amount of extension leads I had to pat test for them. I could sort of tell just what the installation must have looked like.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much a lot of the 7999 sector is the installation of pre-checked equipment. So there's a lot of reliance on the equipment being pre-checked before it's actually put into place. So sometimes it just doesn't work.
So there's another one for your Christmas wish list, Luke. BS 7909 training. I'm sure that's in amongst all your wants for SPD learning, arc fault detection learning,
And
7909 learning, and every other bits of marina learning. And yeah, it's incredible when you look in the regs book how. I mean, look at I think one of the biggest things that makes a case in point is look at a code breaker book, right? The only time the codes are mentioned is in the model forms.
Yeah.
Of 7671, and yet there's a whole bloody book, and there's tons and tons and tons of debate. You can pick. Me and Dave have had this discussion before. You can pick up that regs book and find some quirky sentence and go, "Where's the industry guidance?" Oh, there isn't any. You could develop an entire training course and industry guidance out of parts of the regs book. There isn't enough. I mean, the one that we always go on about where the DC immunity, an AM7 DC and an AC network code. There's no guidance. There's nothing. In fact, you were at Alex, weren't you, looking at our rigs?
yeah, I was actually. I really enjoyed that.
It was
Going
good.
back to your codes, actually, can I just bring up a subject?
Go on,
When
then.
I was first coming through the industry, I was really worried that I didn't know how to code very well. I would hear from one person that something was such a code,
Yeah.
take it as gospel, maybe code it at that, bump into somebody else, and they'd say I was wrong. And that
Yeah.
happened continuously, and there was a lot of people with different views on things. And I just thought it was me. I just thought maybe I'm forgetting, or maybe I'm misinterpreting this. And it wasn't until I went to one of the NIC events and they actually played a game. It was across the board. It was like no one knew what was going on. It was like there wasn't like a majority. It was across the board. And it was then that I realised that no one knows what's going on. You like you said, you could make a course on this because people just don't understand this properly. How can people go out doing all these EICRs and you're singing from different hymn sheets?
Well, Dave will probably chip in here at some point. But just before he does, before he starts his monologue,
Go on.
one of the things so the very first time I went to a code breaking session, it was the very first NAPIT event I went to, and I think the book had just come out, the first one, and it massively kicked off because like the NIC event, they gave everybody cards that everybody held up, C1, C2, C3, and they put very simple picture on. So what's the code? C1, C2. They talked through. The whole room was a balanced mix of FI, C3, C2, and then one bloke held up the C1. And when they highlighted the bloke who held up the C1, the whole room turned on him, but not in a horrible way. There was a bloke at the front who turned around and went, "What fucking drugs are you on, pal?" And everybody started laughing. And then what the whole room realised by the end of this half-hour session that they all were really bad at remembering the regs and how to properly allocate the codes. And it kind of one thing I found with the code breaker stuff, there are people out there, Dave knows who I'm talking about, that say the code breaker book is eroding engineering judgment. I would say bollocks. It's not. What it's actually doing is putting a common parity on some engineering judgment decisions around a subject matter. You and I both know, for instance, if there was a C3 in here, but you saw it in a pensioner's home, and it could have caused a far higher risk than a C3, you as the inspector would C2 the damn thing. You wouldn't see through it. And there would be no one who could tell you were wrong, unless you went around and C1'd everything, including, no screw cap cover on socket C1, then you'd be a bit of an arsehole. And I think that's one of the problems in our industry. There are lots of people who either C1 and C2 stuff that isn't. Then you get other people who do EICRs who are told you're not allowed C1s and C2s. So they're all C3s when you look at it and you go mad. And it comes down to either contractual reasons or competence reasons. Dave, you can start your monologue on it now.
Yeah, I mean, the first EICR codebreaker book, which I have in my hand here, was fairly tiny for the Amendment 3 of the 17th edition. When I was first approached about contributing to this, I was pretty much against it.
You were.
I was. Not because that I thought it would erode engineering judgment necessarily, but I obviously come from the trading background. I'm under the opinion that the people who are authorized to do this work aren't technically competent enough to properly assess the risk, to interpret the regulations. And I had this issue with the Electrical Safety First Best Practice Guide as well. The authorization, authorizing electricians to be able to do this work. Fundamentally, if I'm going to go do an EICR on a installation, I should have sufficient competence of that relative type of installation.
Yeah.
With regards to the wiring systems, the installation methods, the erection methods, everything. And when we create a book like this, it can easily become chapter and verse of a reference material. When they upgraded it to the 18th edition, the book is nearly, I don't know, must be like nearly 10 times as big. They've added a lot of risk assessment information in that. The model codes are there. The model codes are there, but there's a lot of guidance about how to effectively risk assess. Now, NAPET in the Codebreaker book do stand by the code, but as Paul suggested, there might be some codes that you choose to escalate or come down from, as long as the inspector has that engineering judgment. The problem is how we obviously develop that. The book is a guidebook. It's a guidebook that they support and they back. There are many times that I code away from the book because, again, it's down to your own assessment of the environment, the utilization, the demand, and everything. It took a while for me to conceive that the book was in the interest of EICRs because, again, I didn't want a book of this is the code and that's it. But it's not written that way. It gives its interpretation. But you really, the rest of the book with the information for the client, the risk assessment and all that stuff, if you read the whole book and not just the codes, then it's a great book.
I've personally, so I'll give you, I've got a load of them, but one of them would be fire rated consumer units under the stairs or on the route of an exit, obviously recommendation C3, unless obviously there's thermal damage and blah, blah, blah. I've been on a few properties where it might be an old house which has been converted into flats. It's underneath someone's stairs. But obviously the person that lives upstairs has got no say in the matter. And I've actually C2'd it just because I don't feel the person downstairs gets to choose whether the person upstairs gets to live or not.
Yeah, I don't think many people would actually argue with you, to be honest with you.
I know there's an argument as well. I actually put it on an Instagram post because it was really weird. It went 50-50 for ages, and it was cables recessed within 50 mil of the building fabric, obviously no earth containment, no CD protection, and everyone was like C3/C2, and I sort of leant towards C2 because ongoing, if this was left in place, there is it's very, very rare. It's like playing pin the tail on the donkey. Is someone going to put something through the wall and touch it? But it is possible. If of all the properties out there, one person's going to eventually do it, and so you might as well see to it.
Yeah, the problem is the way the codes are used. Because the C1 or the C2 result in the unsatisfactory, a lot of engineers now allow that to reflect their interpretation of a code. Because they don't want to unsatisfy this report. They do want to unsatisfy it. That does have some consequence to that. Now, my opinion with coding is if it's immediately dangerous, I can immediately touch a danger, it's C1. If one action, such as going into a wall, would then create potential, it's C2. What's Richard Townsend's one?
Richard Townsend has got a great saying. He says, if I can see it, I can touch it, it can kill me now, it's C2. If it's liable to injure me at some point eventually, it's effectively a C2. And if it's anything else, it's just piss poor workmanship, but that won't kill me now or kill someone in the future. It's a C3. And if I find, he had a great example of a luminaire that was suffering thermal damage. It may have just been one. So you can code what you see, but you would also look at FI. You would want to investigate further the entire circuit. Yeah. So he had some really good examples of.
Where the code is, you're going back to your example of a cable buried less than 50 mm in the wall with no mechanical protection. The one action of bearing into that cable would result in a risk of electric shock. So as far as I'm concerned, it's potentially dangerous. That one action, C2. The problem is
it's IKEA everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's putting things in walls.
Yeah. So the problem is that C2 creates an unsatisfactory report, which electricians don't want to provide because of all these properties that have this. So the problem really here is that the C1, C2 becoming immediate unsatisfactory is creating this debate over when we C2 or C3 things. Because a lot of electricians, they'll have an installation that's been there for 10 years with the cable buried in the wall, and they don't want now to suddenly say that's a fail. So retrospectively, they think we don't want to unsatisfy that now. So the real problem here is actually the use of the codes and the fact that we're forced to make it unsatisfactory. We should have some other level of our own risk assessment to determine whether it's unsatisfactory or not. We should be able to see to it, but still keep it as a satisfactory report. That's the problem.
I completely agree with you, because again, I'm showing my age here. On the 16th edition, I remember when RCDs were coming in and RCDs weren't mandated. Now RCDs everything, and if not, people are C2ing them left, right, and centre. If they weren't non-compliant when these installations were selected and erected, you immediately, in my opinion, go into the realm of best engineering practices. Is there an enhancement of safety in making your decision? Yes. However, you need to inform that person with skill and due diligence as to what the benefits are, but the decision and the risk is still owned by them. You have to inform them and take all reasonable steps to inform them of why they should have additional RCD protection and why, under the current regulations you're inspecting to, it would be non-satisfactory. I've always said to people, when you are doing an EICR, if you are thinking about the end goal of satisfactory or unsatisfactory, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. You need to just do the inspection and apply your knowledge of the regulations and pragmatic engineering judgment, and then summarize it and see whether it's compliant or not. Within 10 minutes, you'll know, fundamental systems. But the cable's buried in 50 mil. For me, if they're within the zones and they're in a block of flats 8 stories up and there's no RCD protection on it, I wouldn't get my knickers in a twist.
No,
I just wouldn't.
That's the problem, though, is we don't have this enhanced engineering understanding and application.
No.
For proper engineering judgment. It's a case of
and this
it's
is
black and white, yes or no.
So this is one of the things as me as a client gets the hump with now, because I can have an installation that is fine and it fails because the wiring regs have moved so far on in 20 years, it's deemed unsatisfactory. Now, at some point when the insurance companies start getting involved and it's a place of work, the manager of the installations is immediately made to look like a complete bell end. But he's actually not, because he knows if it's being maintained correctly and it's used correctly and the systems and procedures work, there's nothing wrong with it. But yet he could still end up with an unsatisfactory report. And this is why when I was doing EICRs, I would write a small novel of engineering judgment alongside that report, where it said additional comments. I'd say see report, and I'd append my summary one-pager. And I would say, while the inspection has been unsatisfactory, this installation was selected to an older edition. There's nothing wrong. There's some issues for improvement. There's some additional works, additional inspections based on the sampling, and just lay it all out there. That's all you can do. If you've got a good client, they'll go, actually, yeah, I need a satisfactory report. So let's look a bit further and let's actually understand what risk we have within these installations. And it may be, let's be honest about it, it may be a perfect one, again, going back to RCD application. So if you inspect and test my railway, let's say my old one, the DLR, which had RCDs and everything, well, we were ripping them out. So technically then it would fail an EICR for not having RCD protection. But the needs of my business, from an operations and a safety perspective, I didn't need RCDs. So Luke, you saw a device at Alex, and it's on YouTube, where we injected DC into an installation. The Docklands Light Railway is just one huge leaking DC buzz bar through London, yeah? So if I put an RCD in and it saturates that RCD, I have a potentially unsafe installation. So what am I going to do? I'm going to remove it. I'm going to remove the danger and stick with my first principles of thermal and magnetic protection, mechanical protection, and EBADS or EBADOS or ADS, or whatever we want to call it. That's what I'm going to stick with, and I'll write that risk assessment. Oh, by the way, just for marketing purposes, if anybody has issues with the risk assessment section of the code breaker, please let me know, because it was the one I wrote for the DLR for exemption of RCDs. So I put a lot of work into risk assessments because I had to justify to TfL's insurance bodies that we were happy with not having RCD protection. So it was quite a big thing. And but by the way, we did put RCDs anywhere where after vandalism the public could touch or come into contact, and those RCDs were all DC immune special ones, which you saw in that box, and that's what we did. So
Can I ask some AFDD questions? No, sorry, not AFDD.
It's your podcast. You can ask whatever you want, good sir.
So I understand that if there is DC leakage within a circuit, it can saturate an RCD, preventing it from, recognizing earth leakage. And what I don't understand is, even though we're saying this, I like to visually see it in my head. So what's happening with this DC? Is it running down the line conductors? Is it running down the CPC? How is it getting from, I don't know, a solar panel? It's got to be, there's two different types of DC, if I'm correct. Is it pulsating DC?
Pulsating and smooth.
Pulsating go through some diodes, isn't it? If you turn AC into DC, I did that.
If you just put AC through a diode or two, it will then obviously just create a DC, but the AC sine wave will still appear to be the top half, so it's a pulsating wave. You can use capacitors to try to smooth that out. If it's from a battery source, it's just nice smooth DC.
So how is it saturating the RCD? Like what conductors is it going down? Is it going down the CPC? Because I remember actually, I think Paul said if someone was to accidentally bond maybe a solar panel and something was to go wrong. So
it can work its way. It can work its way through the earthing system, because remember, everything goes back to the center point of the transformer. So what you'll end up getting, especially on PME systems, is a rise in DC across either the neutral or the earthing of the electrical installation. If that's the case, then what you're going to have is effectively all of your electronics saturated with DC. Now, if you look at if you draw a picture of a circuit, including an electrical installation and transformer, anything that goes through your live goes back down through your neutral, back to the center point of the transformer, and back round through your live. That's what happens when you do an earth loop impedance. So it's natural that you are going to get some sort of pickup on that system of DC floating, because DC doesn't act like the way AC does. AC just wants to get down to earth. DC seems to go. It's really weird, because we monitored it at a DLR, and it didn't just go into the ground. It went in the ground, out the ground, back onto the rails, back into the buildings. It literally just went around eating metalwork. It didn't have what we would consider normal pattern about it. It just kept chewing on metal and corroding things. And we measured. I mean, on one upstand, we measured 110 amps at one of the depots of DC, which had leaked from the traction system. Well, when I say leaked, that's the wrong term. The traction system configuration, the return, the negative, was basically the ground. So it was just jumping on and off of metalwork. So if that's able to get into any of the electronic components within an RCD, so there's a device, some of the old ones you get like iron cores, but Dave, they're toroids, aren't they now? They're
toroid coils, yeah.
Toroid coils. And they are basically a smaller version of those big clunky things. And if they saturate that toroid coil, then what will happen is if you draw, we did this with Joe Ward, Joe Ward, Joe Ward. Wow, there's a unique combination. Joe Ward, sorry, Joe, if you're listening. So Joe Robinson, if you look at the sine wave, you have that 0 degree angle that the sine wave starts from, and then the current will either lead or lag depending on the load. Well, if you when you're saturated by DC, it will kick it at an angle, say plus 20 degrees. And what happens is on either side of that 0 degree of the sine wave, you have a plus 120 volts, a minus 120 volts, which will give you 240 volts up and down, If you move that 0 degree axis out by 20 degrees, what you're going to have is an imbalanced positive and negative sine wave, which means you're not going to have a stable field. And that's what the DC does. It doesn't give you a stable field. Now, that stable electromagnetic field caused by the toroid, when you go to push your trip button, it's reliant on there being a stable field, but there isn't one. So that trip circuit doesn't work, which is why that test button never works when it's saturated to a point, if that makes sense. Watch the video again, and there's a visualization that Joe's got some great software.
And so it kicks it up. If you think about what you saw at Elex, if you remember, the RCDs did trip, but they required somewhere nearly 100 milliamp. You had to have a lot more, because you're not starting from from 0. You're starting biased.
290 milliamps.
It's in one direction. So I can kind of, another thing that's sort of confused me, but I think you've answered it, is obviously if you had like a 61008 RCD, there's no functional earth or anything. There's no earth on it. It's just a line and a neutral. So I kind of wondered, well, if someone has connected bonding to a solar panel and it's gone bad and some DC's come down it, how has this managed to get into this device that only has a line and a neutral? But like you said, it probably goes off. I suppose
it will work its way into the system.
Yeah.
It works its way into the system at the end of the day. That's remember, the earthing system is connected at the star point in a transformer.
Yeah, and so if it's in the common system, that 61008 device obviously just monitors the current between line and neutral. And if it's leaking into the system, then there's an imbalance in the current between line and neutral. And so when it monitors the overall current, there's an imbalance there.
And remember something, DC can appear in a system from a connected load. In normal operation or fault condition, there can be a capacitive effect, there can be an induction effect. There's loads of different ways that transients, which is stuff that shouldn't be there, can appear within a fixed electrical installation. Now, domestic, loads of people go, don't be stupid, domestic. And I would agree with you 20 years ago. But nowadays, and we know what the future's going, it is getting more complex. So, and I think, if you don't mind me saying, Dave, I think the industry bodies we're being spoon-fed little crumbs. And at the moment, we don't need crumbs. We need full meals. We need guys to be eating a lot of this and realizing there's a big step up needed.
I mean, since the work we've been doing recently, we're seeing more and more people come to us with manufacturers' literature, which is stating Type A. You had one the other day, it was Type B, is that right?
It is Type B. There's a German manufacturer. Here's one for you. So a German boiler manufacturer, okay, has basically said that for their device to be installed, that they recommend Type B RCD. So that's 500 quid straight away. So we challenged it on the wonderful world of Twitter, because whatever happens on Twitter is gospel. And they came back and basically stated that, oh well, you don't actually need to comply with it because it's German standard. It's a German boiler. So you don't have to comply. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. The German VDE standards are an offshoot of the 60364 series. And we have Type B in this country. And if you're selling it in this country to comply with all the directives, we would have to follow, hang on a minute, isn't it in the regs? Follow manufacturer's instructions. So this is a marketing person who's made the worst decision ever to respond. But imagine the boiler fitter, he's going to turn around and go, right, I've got to fit a Type B RCD. So I've now got to chop the tails. And I've got to put a new board. I've got a new separate shower enclosure in, because you can't put a Type B in within the existing board. Because if you look at the what is it? I can't remember the IEC 60 something or another technical report. Hang on, it's IEC TR 62350 has it's called Guidance for the Correct Use of RCDs for households and similar use, and it talks about how you configure an RCD. So if you have a lot of Worcester Bosch, they're doing they're recommending now Type A RCD protection. So a lot of the plumbers now are putting RCD fuse spurs, which are Type A, but that doesn't do jack shit, because what will happen is if you've got an AC upstream, it will just saturate the AC type. So there's a big problem. And last week I actually spoke to His Holiness Gasman God. I was blessed with a phone call from him, and we were talking about various bits and bobs. But it's a problem which the plumbers and the gas heating engineers are going to face, and also sparks. So hopefully me and Dave are going to be able to do something about that to just try and clarify that, because this may get very stupid very quickly. And the last thing we want is gas engineers putting boilers in, and then you coming along and going, oh, the RCD don't work. Yeah. You're looking on the roof for a PV system. Now your boiler's a threat.
I mean, the Beamer handbook, the RCD handbook, that's got the RCDs given with a selectivity arrangement. So we do need to kind of just start reminding more people about that. It is in there.
I mean, even in a Voltimum article last week, it said Regulation 53133 requires RCDs to be taken into consideration for DC components and frequencies, and it says quite clearly, Type A should be considered where some of the following equipment is installed. LED lighting, that's every house pretty much now. Variable speed drive, okay. Washing machines, because my washing machine requires Type A. UPS systems, okay, I don't really have them in a domestic. Lighting and heating controls, smart homes. Appliances such as washing machines, induction hobs, dishwashers and fridges. We can add to that boilers. We can add to that EV. We can add to that PV. We've got a problem, and the industry is doing nothing about it.
Yeah, I mean,
the installer.
The Beamer guide the Beamer guide says USB socket outlets, unless specifically advised by the manufacturer that Type AC is okay. Class 1 IT and multimedia equipment, power supplies for Class 2 equipment, appliances such as washing machines, lighting controls such as dimmers, induction hobs, and electric vehicle charging, where any smooth DC fault current is less than 6 milliamp.
Kettle, doesn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's not much when you look at it. So that boiler, by the way, that boiler is from a German company called Weissmann, Viessmann, and it basically says we also recommend installing an AC/DC sensitive RCD Class B that occur. Now, it's fairly evident if they've put that, somebody has done the work to measure the leakage of that equipment. Because now all these pumps, I mean, I've got a pump downstairs connected to my boiler, and it's, I think the old one was 4.1 amps. The new one's like 14 watts.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So they're using sine wave manipulating technology now in their pumping systems and in their boiler systems to get them super, super efficient, which is great, but it's not good for the fixed installation. And the industry, let's be honest about it, Luke, have you ever seen the industry turn around ever publicly and go, we've got a national problem with this? No, because it's deemed mudslinging, or it's too controversial, or commercial operating bodies will lose money because of it. What about the national good? What about the public good? What about the good of electricians and the safety of people's homes? Scary, isn't it?
It is scary. It's all getting very confusing now as well. Like one sort of, it seems like one thing sort of treads on another thing's toes. There's a lot to take, like you were saying about the boiler. That's just one very small part of a house, and there's other things in that house. The boiler's saying it needs this type of RCD, and there's another thing saying it needs a different type of RCD. If it's on the same circuit, where do you go?
Well, I would recommend to blokes now, if you're listening to this, that one of the key things that I would do on any electrical installation now is start looking at leakage current per circuit, seeing if you are picking up any sort of DC leakage using a clamp meter. Just for your own sanity, really, while all the installations on the full. I've said this before, Dave. I think we need to start looking at these installations while they're being used, because still to this day, there was an event the other week where guys were asking about RCD Type A's, getting them to work, and the recommendation was unplug everything, test the RCDs with no connected loads, switch it all off, switch it all back on again, and record the result. That's all you can do. Test the wiring, but the wiring's no good if, when it's in use and under anger, it's being, what's it? I think the term is the safety of the protective measure is being compromised.
Well, again, I mean, even Guidance Notes 3 tells you when you're doing the initial verification to have your equipment disconnected for the RCD tests. You know, I remember saying that to the guys at Steve Willis. You know, if any of your equipment connected, then obviously creates this problem with the RCD. You're not going to detect it in your initial verification strategy.
Yeah,
not with the way Guidance Notes 3 is currently written.
So, Luke, if I was you, mate, what I would do, this is my own personal preference here, so please feel free to shoot me. If I was doing a brand new wire up, I would install a main switch with the SPD next to the main switch. That way it's not in the main board. I would put in a 14-way RCPO board. All of those RCPOs would be Type A as a minimum, and I would see that as a reasonably practicable step to go on a new fixed installation, unless I find evidence that I need a Type B, in which I would have a separate shower module, and I would have Type Bs in there, or I'd make passive provision. So if you're installing for a client, they say they want a new board, and I want to put a PV in and an EV, or I'm going to be putting new boilers in, it may be that you put a 12-way board in, a set of Henley blocks and some tails, and a little shower unit, and you label it up for Type B use in future. And then the next bloke comes along and goes, result, I've got a board ready to go to put 2 Type B RCPOs in. You're fully compliant. There you go. There's a new domestic.
Did you just recommend the SPD in separately? Or was that
outside of the consumer unit.
Outside of the unit. Yeah, and the only reason I say that, mate, is, and again, I'm a bit of a trust but verify freak. If you are going to have a mass transient kick that SPD into touch, and the homeowner isn't watching it, when it eventually just goes pop and it's inert and it's unuseful, any thermal stresses on that may end up damaging your board, because it's right next to your main switch. How long is it until we see pictures of an SPD that's melted the main switch and damaged the board? So if it's a sacrificial piece of kit, keep it out of the board.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's,
you're
Again,
it's
personal preference now. I am using my own engineering judgment to prevent a prediction that may happen. So don't shoot me for it, folks.
I've been whacking a lot of contacting boards in recently because it's about 40, 50 quid for an SPD. I have been putting it in the same board.
That's
And
fine.
as I'm doing it, I'm sitting there thinking, no one's ever going to check this. I mean, no one tests their own RCD. No one's going to look at this.
Well, and that's the trouble. There's a cover on them as well. And with one thing I do like, the Wilex main switches with the SPDs in them, I think are brilliant because if you put them in the right place, that's one thing that people can physically just access and pull out rather than having to lift a cover up. But then again, there are SPDs you can get now with little voltage outputs on them. I saw one bloke, he puts an LED on the top of his boards, where basically, so when the SPD goes, the volt-free outputs basically take power and they make the LED light up. So if your SPD ever blows, you can have a little light indicator on the board, which is really cool. But a lot of them don't come with that.
I mean, client awareness is something that we are focusing a lot on, especially Paul, because you are a client, aren't you?
Yes, I'm just having a look at my book now. Hang on.
Yeah. And so again, this is something I've often looked towards the voluntary bodies, the CPSs, trying to arm us with better guidance material. I mean, I know the NIC did those good little cards, those little handout cards.
Yeah.
It would be great if they had those that you could hand to a client that gave some client information about the SPD, about the AFDD if you've installed it, just to kind of help you reinforce your message to the client. Because you don't want to try and sell them the technology. You want to be able to correctly advise them on the tech and allow them to make a well-educated decision. Because otherwise, if all will in the world, if you want to try and do the best job, you're going to find yourself outpriced, aren't you?
Yeah. So just on that, so Surge Protection Devices Limited, I don't know if you boys can see, I'm holding up the book, but they actually do have little green contacts at the top of their SPD devices for connected indicators and stuff.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so you can actually basically then connect it into a BMS maybe or whatever to understand whether it's gone or not.
I'd probably put that for a handy little relay and put some sort of sounder in there because I don't think they'd look in there for a light.
No, well, it's all individual preference, but I think there's passive relays there to do something with it, which is quite cool. But anyway, yeah. So where were we? Yeah, so we've been talking all sorts of shenanigans. Luke, where do you see the future of our industry going?
It's expanding very fast in many different directions. I think once upon a time, a Sparks could pretty much try his hand at anything. I think it's going to get to a stage now where we're going to have to accept that we can't do everything. We're going to have to sort of just maybe split the industry up, maybe even split up the 7671 into smaller segments and just say, look, I'm going to be 100% tip top at doing this particular task. Maybe I could take, other tests and qualifications like you want to do this bit as well. But I don't think you should. It's so wide now, like you're saying, all these different types of RCDs, and you've got these LEDs coming out now. You've got these special boilers coming out. You've got solar panels. I think they should stop trying to keep it all under one roof and just divide it up a little bit. I mean, it doesn't stop you from taking loads of different tests and becoming qualified and everything. I just don't think they should run you through one sort of, send you to college once and sort of chuck you out the other end and just say, oh, you can do everything.
Well, I think the guys coming out of college now, I mean, we know that from going to colleges, they're not prepared. There's the Sitting Guild syllabus isn't updated for the latest edition of regs. It doesn't help every 2-3 years. There's an amendment coming out. But you've made a really interesting point about, guys are going to have to possibly accept that we can't do everything, and maybe we do have to specialise. I mean, Dave, what's your view on the whole thing? I know we've spoke about this in other podcasts, but
I mean, previous podcasts we did with Adrian, we talked about obviously the industry. We had touched on Trey, and I talked about my idea of the license model, and I highlighted on that as Luke's just mentioned, it's impossible for you to maintain a high technical level of competence in all of these technical areas and be tip top. So the idea of having just, you start off as a license, maybe as an electrician, but then you have individual licenses for electric vehicle, solar photovoltaic, smarts, all these things, which you can then obviously all do training in. But then if you want to then have if you want to then do that work, you've got to obviously have you've got to have that gusto to actually maintain your knowledge in that. And so the idea that I had was the idea of you know anyone who pays a fee to these bodies and organisations, that needs to go back in to providing CPD opportunities for the electricians. And if I'm, for example, right now at the end of a 2-year strategy doing solar photovoltaics, and I right now fancy jumping into EV, I can go and do the 2919, whatever it is, but then I can capture some free provided CPD by the body that I support with my fee, and I can have that added to my license or switched over, and I can now go into that journey for the foreseeable. But the client at the end knows that I've got these little areas. Because the problem we're going to have is like we have right now. People will go through that trading journey. They'll have their gold card. They'll be a qualified electrician. But as you've just pushed to, Luke, I mean, there's such a wide variety of different skills and responsibilities to maintain high levels of workmanship in. It's not practicable.
I'd love to see like a car, like a driving license car. You flip it around to all the vehicles you can drive. I mean, maybe keep college as it is, and you sort of come out and you've got like a varied knowledge and everything. But I'd love to see a car where you get that. It says electrician on one side, and you flip it around and it goes, I don't know, domestic or.
Well, you're looking at the gas safe model, aren't you? Basically, where they've got their core competencies. Do you know what? I have to say, anybody who does something like that can produce a card, but a card of merit that is traceable, verifiable, transparent. And requires continuous development and ongoing competence, I would back. However, we've been talking quite a bit to the gas safe engineers and the ACS systems, and a lot of them see it as a rip-off, a con, a license to print money. I think, would you say that there's almost an inherent, there's a bit of a behavioural change maybe across generations required? Because there's no school like the old school to a certain extent. I can do everything. I think bravado.
I don't know because that scheme doesn't necessarily reinvest into CPD opportunities for the heating engineers, does it?
No, it doesn't. It takes money.
It takes money, but this needs to reimburse. If an electrician pays a fee, that needs to go into the provision of free CPD, which they can then use and consume to extend the length of their license. And if they choose to ignore that CPD commitment, then they have to be reassessed more rapidly. So it's in the interest of the electrician to maintain your CPD, which is provided for free, and then the client has an electrician that's self-motivated, and the industry is feeding you with competence. I don't see a model like that. I don't think the heating engine industry is like that.
So if you're listening, electrical industry, that's a perfect model to adopt.
If you was to divide up everything, I don't know how you do it, if you did it in containment or if you did it in like sort of commercial, industrial. I mean, the smaller you could divide it, the better. But if you actually had proof, and you could even maybe sort of give it levels of sort of bronze, silver, gold, whatever you want to do on the back, it could almost be a pricing structure. If you was to go to a CSCS site and say, "Hi, I'm Luke. I can do I can do containment. I can do tray, whatever.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm a gold, whatever. I'm this good at it. That's how much I want to be paid for it."
Well, yeah, I agree with you, because if you go to the big commercial industrial sites, you'll have a level 1 to a level 3 containment installer. And that level 1 to 3 may be based on sheer experience and number of times assessed, maybe in that. And if anything, you could build up a portfolio of experience over, say, a decade rather than 6 weeks.
Might be some gentle competition as well. I'd love to have a card with everything's gold down the side. How good are you at bending tube? Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I think that would have to be something maybe for the newer generations coming through, because I think a lot of the current gold card holders I think they get the hump when the regs book comes out, and yet we know from seeing it and living it, I mean, for me and Dave, we're people think we're reasonably clued up. It's hard, Dave.
Well, and again, I've said this to you before, Paul. Though there are thousands of people in our industry that really should be in this industry.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't have the intent. They don't have the initiative. They don't even want to maintain technical knowledge. Yeah. They want to grind and earn money, and they would just shove a middle finger up to anything that suggests otherwise. I want the industry to upskill into a level where those guys just get killed out of the industry. Obviously, the industry will support them with the opportunity to stay in the industry, but we've got to find a way to flush out the crap.
It's nice to see effort rewarded as well. So, like you said, I mean, they would flush out the crap if they don't want to put the time in. They'd have nothing to show.
It'd be great for the industry bodies as well to recognise the hard graft of sparks, because there's a lot of industry award dues. Dave knows where I'm going with this. There's a lot of industry award dues where these awards are given out. Like, I mean, Ryan is able to predict pretty much every single award that's ever given out, and a lot of these awards now are about sponsorships, and it'd be really good for, if you're working hard on a firm and you're a young apprentice, or you've just come out your time and you've really done something good, that you can win, apprentice in a month and get a free upgrade of your tools, and do you know what I mean? 500 quid to go out on a beer with your mates or something. That would be really cool for the industry to give back like that, because it would motivate a lot of lads to want to get that little bit of a spotlight on them that they could be proud of, which will, make them want to work harder with the industry.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, okay. So I think weirdly enough, you're kind of aligned with our previous podcast there, really, on where the future of the industry is going. I have hopes that there will be, I think it will be good. I think there'll be a lot of pain, a lot of behavioural attitudes that need changing. Dave, is there anything else you would like to talk about on this? I know, Luke, you wanted to talk about apprenticeships.
No, there was something I wanted to talk about with Luke, but I'll probably take too long to talk about it now. We'll do it for another podcast. Okay. I wanted to just kind of go over that discussion we had at Alex about how you manage your workflow, because I'm crap at that. And you remember you told me about how you do all your bookings and all that stuff?
I'm an absolute geek. See, another thing, when I was younger, I was weird. Like, so I'd have friends playing Echo the Dolphin on the Sega. I'd be sitting behind them with a piece of paper, cracking the codes on the passwords.
Oh my God, I remember Echo the Dolphin.
Yeah. I'll be
Sega Mega Drive.
How many lives have you got? What's this? And they go, oh, I've got P, little n, Z, X, whatever. That's the password for this level. I'll take it down. I'd scribble it down. And I'd just keep doing that until I figured out what the code was. And I'd go, oh, I put this in. And it'd end up on the last level with all the weapons, all the points. I was just an absolute weirdo. I love things like that. But it's followed me forward, because I'm all over automation. I'm into, there's a software called Zapier, which really helps me out. I've got loads of softwares that I mess around with. For a one-man band, it almost makes you not a one-man band, because you've got a lot of things going off in the background, people getting automated emails and text messages, and your diary's filling itself out by itself.
Yeah, I think that, that probably that'll probably be like a 20-minute discussion, so we might want to save it for another one, Paul. But yeah, that's something I do want to talk with Luke about, because again, I'm rubbish about managing data inquiries, calls. And I remember speaking to Luke at Alex, and he just basically said, "Oh yeah, do it like this," and kind of blew me away. And I'll be honest, we were busy at Alex. I forgot a lot of what you said, mate. So yeah, we'll have that another time.
So on that bombshell, then, I think what we'll do is we'll wind this up. Luke, if you will have us back for another short one, we'll get you back for another short podcast, and you can tell us how you master the world.
I don't know about that so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me back. I'll be honest, I do struggle with talking. I know my vocabulary isn't that good. Like you guys come out with words, I kind of feel like out of fire with, like, in the old days when the firemen used to shovel, they'd pass them along, and in the end one would throw the water on. I kind of feel like that's me when I come to talking. There's always, I read lots of books. I understand when people talk to me. When it comes to me talking, I feel like I turn around to take the bucket off the next guy, and he's not got a bucket there, and the word's missing, and that's just the way I talk. The fact that I've actually managed to do a podcast with you guys, and you invite me back, it's fantastic.
Luke, can I just say that if you would have known me 10 years ago, you would have just gone, "Cool, this guy's a complete tool." Although there's loads of people listening going, "He is a tool, shut up." But I was the same. I didn't know what a correct oration was. When I had to talk in front of people in my career, I was like, just say what you think. Practice in front of the mirror. And then my missus went, "You can't say that. You're swearing too much. You're babbling. You're not making any sense." That's all. It's growth. I mean, I'm lucky in respects that I've been privileged to hang around with some really good people I respect, who encourage me to be better in the way I talk. I mean, since I met the E5 guys, I swear less. I do. I swear less. How weird is that? But it is what it is. Right. Well, we're going to end this now. Thank you very much, chaps. And any final thoughts to this before we go?
I think we've summed it all up, really, haven't we?
Brilliant. Right. Well, everybody listening, thank you very much. And we will check us out on the next one. And until the next time, everybody, take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.